Hey guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Welcome, my friends, and a huge happy birthday to one of my biggest fans and a super diehard supporter of this podcast, my dad. Happy birthday, Pa Rand. I love you. More than that, welcome to another exciting modern leadership chat with an author expert. I am so excited to introduce today's topic because job seeking is such an important topic. No matter what career stage you are in, statistics say you will change jobs and careers multiple times as we head into the future. And with technology, even if your title or company doesn't change, your job description will. So let me introduce you to Steve Acho, an expert in adding more human to the hiring process. Steve is the author of Why Technology Recruiting is Broken and What to Do About It. He earned his MBA while living in Japan and working for the CEO of Mazda. From there, he went on to consulting with Fortune 100s and currently operates the Detroit-based technology staffing firm Solstice Consulting Group. Steve, I am so excited to deep dive this topic. How are you today?
I'm doing great, thanks. Thank you very much for having me, Jake.
We got a lot to talk about as we do this, as we get into this podcast, because you've lived in Japan, you've worked for Mazda, you have this great background in helping job seekers figure out what they're looking for. But before we get into all of that, what did we miss by way of introducing Steve Acho?
Oh, I think that was a good enough intro for what we're going to talk about.
Let's go back a little bit and talk about this opportunity you had to go to Japan. Now, I love Japan. I was there in 2002. We went over for the World Cup, spent some time in Osaka and a little bit of time in Tokyo. Tell me, how did you end up working on your MBA and with the CEO of Mazda?
Well, I've been studying the Japanese language since I was fairly young, since I was in high school. We were one of very few high schools in Michigan to offer Japanese, so I took on the program, and there were about 4 or 5 people in the class, and I got an opportunity to go to Japan when I was about 17 and just fell in love with it. I find most cities or really Asian countries, for Americans in particular, to be either love it or hate it. I don't hear from too many people who visit Tokyo or some other city in the East and they come back and say, it was okay. They either couldn't wait to leave or they love it, and I was on the love it side. And so I just did a deep dive into the language, and I ended up, being a translator and interpreter to work my way through college, and ended up, getting a job offer to move over there and work. So I took it on and pursued my MBA there and spent a number of years in the auto industry, and it was great. I still visit about once a year.
Well, and being from the Detroit area, you had a background and knowledge of cars and the auto industry. But did you know you wanted to go into that? Did you know you wanted to work with the automotive industry and consulting?
Well, it's, being in Detroit, you just walk down the street and you trip over the auto industry. At least when I was growing up, it's getting a little bit different now. It's kind of become a tech hub. I wasn't necessarily interested in the industry. I'm embarrassed to say, I'm not even really a car guy. So I'm not much of a car parts guy and getting into how it's built and all that. But I'm very interested in the people side. So consumer marketing fascinates me, and essentially the work that I've done with Japanese and in Japan, regardless of the technical part of it, whether I was in finance or IT or HR, is really doing my best to help people to really facilitate better communication among humans. So that's kind of been the one thing. It's always been tough for me. I have such a strange resume. So when I go to a cocktail party and someone says, "What do you do?" It's always a little bit difficult for me to answer that question, because it's like I'm in multiple businesses and they're seemingly unrelated. But that's kind of been the underlying thing, is really just to help humans communicate better and understand each other better. And so I've done a number of seminars with just dozens and dozens of CEOs directly, or in front of groups of people, helping them understand, really giving them actionable advice and helping them understand the Japanese culture and language so they can better communicate with their colleagues.
Well, and the world's more flat than it has ever been before, and businesses,
Agreed.
translating across all these country lines. Steve, we just got back from spending a year overseas as a family. We spent 6 months in Asia, but a little more south from Japan. So we were down in Philippines and Singapore and Thailand and so on. But I wanted to ask you, being a Detroit guy, working for Mazda, was that kind of looked at back in the home front as being a bad decision, or was everybody supportive?
Well, at the time, Ford and Mazda were joint ventured, so it was almost looked at as helping Ford. It wasn't like I was, going to a Japanese company really. And in fact, at the time, the president of Mazda was Mark Fields, who became the CEO of Ford Motor Company for a number of years.
Well, I got to be honest with you. I, like you, am not very much of a car guy. I'm more interested in jumping into this discussion about hiring because you talk about having this background with this eclectic resume. When you go to a cocktail party, it's kind of difficult to lay it all out. And I got to ask you, working in the hiring industry and working with people who are looking for jobs, aren't you finding that more and more that people are kind of bouncing between careers, between different industries, and between different, all sorts of different opportunities?
I do find that, yeah. When I look at the high level metrics, I certainly find exactly what you're saying to be true, but I especially find it in the specific business that I'm in because we operate a technology consulting and staffing company, and so we have clients like Apple and GM and very large companies, and all the way down to well-funded startups who need one person as a consultant for a 6 or 12 months role. And so a good number of the great people that are in our network, like the consultants that currently work for us or that have worked for us, or people that we're looking at doing deals with right now to work together, they're exactly what you're talking about by design, by their choice. They're not people who are looking for lifetime employment and then they get laid off and now they're in between jobs. The people that are in our network specifically, I see a little bit more of this in the industry, what you're talking about, but the people that we work with are the ones that do big data or business intelligence or analytics, and they actually, of their own decision, they enjoy going from role to role, from company to company, solving problems in multiple industries. So I really do find that people are jumping because they want to, because that's what they enjoy doing, and it gives them kind of professional and creative fulfillment to go solve similar problems in different industries and in different companies, and traveling the country.
As you look at this and you see that people are kind of bouncing company, opportunity to opportunity, do you think that the impact of social media, and the reason I ask this is, you look at Facebook, right? And we're just kind of scrolling through our feed, or we go to Instagram or all the social media. We kind of scroll through it really quickly and we kind of jump from topic to topic. And even when you turn on the TV, because of the power of the remote control and on demand, you can kind of change quickly. Do you think this has mentally created a culture for us where not just in entertainment, but also in employment, where our attention spans are a little shorter and we're now we get bored easier and kind of move around? Do you think that one has led to the other? Do you think they're related in any way?
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't know. I mean, it seems like a chicken and egg problem to me. I don't know if we are ADD because we grew up with Sesame Street or cartoons that were, constantly changing every 3 seconds, or if we are that way and the media and the social media are kind of architecting to our likes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we won't, imagine if you were scrolling through your feed and all of these social media giants just waved a magic wand and said, well, now you're not going to be able to scroll so quickly. You're going to have to go really slow. Well, people would jump right off of it because we're so used to, as you say, the on-demand culture. So yeah, I think that kind of does. It seeps into all areas of our lives. And that's why I think it's so important for people, not just in business and in their careers, but just in everyday life, to really be present where you are. If you're going to go on Facebook for 5 minutes, then just go ahead and do it and be present. But not as a habit that you can't control, like smoking, but as a decided conscious thing that you're going to do. And then when you're sitting and talking with the person, that you're actually present with that person. And I think it's an interesting time in our human history because we're forced even more to kind of fight that ADD and to really, because we have more distractions, there's more for us to weed out. I mean, as soon as you and I are talking right now, and so inherently we are saying no to about 1,000 other things that we could both be doing, but we're here concentrating on this, right? And so if you focus on your career in terms of what kinds of problems you enjoy solving and you're good at solving, and you focus on, connecting with people that can help you connect and solve those problems, that you're going to have a lot more career fulfillment.
And I think you're absolutely right. Being present is so important today. And I think as the pendulum kind of swings back from, as we've swung in the direction of kind of bouncing around a lot and being all over the place, the pendulum might be swinging back nowadays where people are starting to focus more, be a little bit more present, because we've gotten so out of whack. There's been so much information that now we need to find ways to control it, ways to, take control of our time. But I wanted to ask you, you work a lot in technology. Your consulting company is technology based, and a lot of the careers in technology are transferable. And so in the technology world, and we just moved from San Jose, California, so we've been kind of in the tech hub around a lot of great engineers. And it seems like a lot of the skills required to work in engineering and work in technology are very translatable. You can kind of bounce jobs. But I wanted to ask you about people who go down a path that is maybe less transferable. And I'll give you an example. People who have higher education in things like a law degree or a medical degree, or, some where they've a PhD and they wanted to be a professor, or they go into politics and now they want to make a shift, and maybe their skills aren't quite as translatable or transferable to a new industry. Do you think that there's a disadvantage, or do you think that there's an advantage that they could be playing up when it comes to career transition?
Well, I am kind of I call myself a delusional optimist. So I think, you kind of take inventory of your Rolodex, your reputation, and your resume, the 3 R's, right? And you utilize those to your advantage to find meaningful work. And so many skills are actually portable. And I think what matters when people are searching for either full-time roles, or whether they're in between jobs, or whether they are gainfully employed but looking for more meaningful work, the question is really to yourself, what do I consider meaningful in terms of what kind of problems do I enjoy and excel at solving? And if you can make a case that you're capable and motivated to do a job, I'm going to listen. As a hiring manager, I'm going to listen. I don't know that everyone will, and that's part of my problem with how, I wrote a book called Why Technology Recruiting is Broken and What to Do About It. But it really, because in my view, the whole thing is broken, and I can explain why. But it's especially ridiculous to me that in technology we can't describe the work in terms of the outcomes. What I mean by that is, when people talk about or post jobs online to hire people, they typically have a job description that doesn't describe a job. It only describes the skills and the experience that someone must have in order to do that job. And that's where someone who may very well be very capable and have a portable skill set will just never even get to have a conversation. And I actually think that's a mistake. What happens if you search any job online, let's say you search like a Java engineer or Java developer or something like that, 90+% of that job description will have nothing to do with the description of a job. It'll just say you must have 10 years of Java, you must have 5 years of this, you must have attention to detail. And those are things that just make it easy for a person to use a checklist and then qualify you. But to me, that's really the biggest mistake. that any hiring manager makes. And so, to your point about people that are changing careers, very often there are people who are very capable of doing the work. And if they can relate their past experience and accomplishments to the outcome of the jobs that they're looking for and make a case, say, this is why. I mean, if you think about a job application, it's just a proposal, right? It's like a company makes a proposal to a bigger company and says, here's what we propose to do for X million dollars. Well, that's really all we're doing on a much smaller scale. If I apply for a job at your company, I'm saying, hi, my name is Steve, and here's how I propose to solve your problem. And when you start that conversation by saying, well, I have no idea what problem you want me to solve because you never talked about it. You only told me what I needed to be, what I needed to have in order to be considered. That's a problem, because in the end, it really doesn't matter what you have. It matters what you can do with what you have.
This is a huge light bulb moment for me because, Steve, I'm currently in the hiring process right now. I'm working on getting somebody hired, and I've put up a job description, or as you talk about, I've listed a number of characteristics that I would like that this candidate has online. And, my frustration with this online recruiting, this online job application process that's really frustrated me. And I look at it and I say, okay, the online technology has made it easier for me to post my job and to get candidates to come to me. And so I can quickly put up a description. I can hit enter. It costs me nothing. And then names and everything roll in. But on the flip side, it's also made it easier for the people who are looking for job seekers.
Much easier. I'm not even sure how easy those online resume databases make it. A person can go on. So what's the job title for the one that you're hiring for, Jake?
Intake specialist.
Okay, so I could go online as someone who's looking for a job as an intake specialist. I could go on one of these, like a Monster or a Dice or many of these others. Almost all of them will do some. Yep, Indeed is one of them too. And I, as a job seeker, I could say intake specialist, and it will bring up, let's say, 300 jobs. I can then hit select all and apply all. And that's ridiculous. That's something that they're doing as a service, supposedly to me, because it makes it easier. And it does make it easier for me. But efficiency doesn't mean effectiveness. And so you are on the other side of that, and you're getting, hundreds of resumes from people that not only didn't they consider your job description that you thoughtfully put out there, but they didn't even read the job title. I mean, they could be an intake specialist for a catering company and or perhaps something that just has nothing to do with, like, they wouldn't even be interested in the job if they actually read it. And so that's a problem, is that we just have this culture of more is better. And I think more is not better. Better is better. And that's you must be frustrated by the number of things that come in. And I think it's good timing that you're doing that, because I think I can give you some really actionable advice that you can take quickly, and it'll help you. So the first thing I would advise you to do is make sure that the job description has performance objectives. And what that means is that this is always the advice that I give to people. So the way that I describe it is, tell me the 3 to 5 most important things that the person has to accomplish in order to be successful. Every sentence should start with a verb. So you're not allowed to say good communication skills. You're not allowed to say 5 years of order intake. What you are allowed to say is whatever the sentence is, it starts with a verb. So, thoughtfully process orders in a blah, 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 blah environment, right? Using this technology. So once you get to those 3 to 5 things where every sentence starts with a verb, and a trick for doing that is just to ignore the job posting for a moment and think forward about 3 to 6 months and think about a performance review. How will you review this person's performance? I guarantee, Jake, in 6 months from now, you're not going to take the best person that you have and say, hey, I'm so glad I hired you 6 months ago because you had 3 years of Excel experience, and now you have 3 years and 6 months experience of Excel. Now I'm going to give you a raise. The moment someone walks in the door and it's their first day of work, no one cares what they have. I don't care if they have a PhD from Harvard. It no longer matters. It only matters what you can do. So let's start hiring based on our assessment that the person is capable and motivated. So how do you do that? Well, one easy way to do that is to start to make a compelling job description that describes the outcome. And I don't think it's a mistake to say, here are the attributes that we're looking for. I do think it's a mistake to stipulate that you won't consider anyone who has less than X number of years of work experience, because by doing that, you're absolutely missing out on some very capable people, and you'll never even know about that.
I want to play devil's advocate on this one for a second, though, because like you said, you got people that are selecting all and applying to everything. And so, for example, I put a stipulation on mine, a requirement that you had to have 3 years of sales experience. Now, I'm smart enough to know that somebody can be a brilliant salesperson and be 1 year experience, or even just have it innately within them that they can do it without experience. But by putting that as a requirement, I automatically eliminate, 70% of the resumes that are coming in of people who have zero experience. I understand that I could be eliminating the number one candidate, the person who could do the best job. But for me, that's a risk I'm willing to take in order to offset, 700 resumes to go through that I don't have time and are likely not going to fit the bill.
So here's a trick to being able to do that, because you're absolutely right. You're going to get an overwhelming amount. And the strategy that you're describing is called weed out the weak. And that is the default of how recruiting has always been done when we were mailing resumes, when we saw job ads in newspapers, and now it's, of course, much more efficient. And the strategy that I'm advising is to identify the strong. So how do you identify the strong when there's 200 applicants? And you don't have these easy criteria to be able to weed out. So one way to do that, so we actually built a platform called Shortro, which stands for Shortcut to an Intro. And before someone formally, well, they're actually applying this way, but we're basically just starting a human conversation with them. So what we do is we say, here are the 3 things that you have to do in order to be successful. So what I want you to do is write one concise sentence next to each one of these that compares your most relevant accomplishment in the past with this. So I'm happy to consider someone who says, if my performance objective is to install or to create complex reports using Tableau, which is a business intelligence tool, and someone says, well, I've never used Tableau, but I have used these 3 other, competitive business intelligence tools, and I've created very complex reports for 5 different industries and blah, blah, blah. So now, after they go down that list, then what I'll have them do is create a short 30-second video that just has them introducing themselves. So think about how the strategy that I'm using shifts. What happens is, and you don't even need to use our software. Of course, we would love for you to, and we would love to, be able to do the work for you. But to kind of apply this methodology on your own, one way to do this is just to set up an auto reply. So every time someone applies for a job, you might get, like, let's say if I'm in your office and I'm the one managing this for you, I put out the job posting and I get 200 applicants. Rather than looking through the 200 to see who I can weed out because they have less than 3 years of X experience, what I do is I don't actually look at anything. I don't even look at one resume. They get an auto reply that has a very human response that says, hey, thanks so much for your interest in this. Here are the performance objectives, as you probably read, even though they probably didn't, right? And it says, please just put a quick sentence in here that tells me your most relevant experience. And so now what I'm doing is I am inherently testing, I'm auditioning them based on criteria that matter. So it's one thing for me to say you must have good communication skills, good written communication skills, but I'm testing them to say, show me that you have good communication skills. Show me that you have good attention to detail. Show me that you actually considered this job versus the many jobs, and you're capable and motivated to do this. And I can do that in a millisecond, because what happens is, out of the 100 Well, let me ask you, Jake, what percentage, when I do something like that, I put out a job posting and let's say I get 100 applications and each one of those people gets an auto reply that says, hey, thanks. Now you get a chance to just take 5 minutes and put a thoughtful reply. What percentage or how many people do you think reply to that?
Well, I got to tell you, I've been doing something kind of like this, but not exactly like this. And the percentages are very low. The way that I've been doing it, Steve, is I've been so I have the requirement on there. Then I get their resume and I kind of just briefly scan it. If I see a word that pops out that of interest to me, then I hit a button that gives them an auto reply that has 6 questions that I say brevity is important to us. So just, I don't want them to write me an essay. Just briefly answer these 6 questions. And then those who reply to that, which is very low.
What percentage do you find?
Oh, let's say 6 out of 30, what's that? 20, less than 20%.
Okay. Yeah.
But you said something that I think that I want to come back to, and that is, then you said, let's have them do a video interview. So I actually have them do a telephone where they call in and leave an answer to a question. And I got to be honest with you, this was a bust for me, and a bust in a bad way. I had to stop doing it because I was getting, let's say 20% of these people who would write back answers. But then when I would send them this telephone interview deal, I was getting like 1 out of 100, like 1% of people that would do this. And so for a number of months, I would just pass them by. I would say, look, if you don't have the commitment to call up and do a telephone interview, then you're out. But
But if nobody does it,
that's right.
It can't work. Yeah.
Yeah. The pool was so small, I had to eliminate it and go a different direction. So I love this conversation. But anyway, we kind of went off topic because hear my story, but you were going somewhere.
Well, I was just getting at the same point that you were, which is that I still have a very small percentage of people that reply to that, but the people that reply are just phenomenal. I mean, that
much
is the
better.
basis where and occasionally I'll tell you, we get responses that say, this is great. I appreciate this detail. Now that I look at it more, I think I'm more of an architect rather than a developer. It looks like you're looking for a developer. But then it's great because now I have somebody that can articulate what they do, what they like to do, and I pick up the phone and now this person is part of our network. And it's really the top of the industry because I'm just going to unfortunately have to assume that most people that are applying haven't really read the job description. Maybe they haven't even read the job title. And so I'm giving them a chance. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. But the thing is, I'm actually measuring things that matter. And there's a big difference in strategy when you do what you're doing, which I think is smart, where if you see something you like, then you send them something and say, hey, answer these questions. As long as the questions are useful to you and they're, it kind of pushes forward a human conversation. And by human, I just mean I feel like hiring and job seeking is just a business transaction, and it's not really a favor to anybody. I don't feel like when I go out to eat, I'm doing them a huge favor. I don't feel like the customer is God. It's like I would just go somewhere else if I didn't like your food and it wasn't worth the money. So it's like an even exchange, right? And so I don't feel like the interview process is like, please, Mr. Hiring Manager, hire me. I'm the best. Let me prove it to you. If somebody says why should I hire you? I would say, why should I work for you? I mean, it should be a back and forth conversation, not prove your worthiness. And so that just being able to go back and forth like you are is inherently more human because it's not just a click of a mouse that gets them to apply. It's like, hey, let's continue this conversation. So here's what you would have to do to be successful. Does that sound interesting to you? Does that sound like something you believe you can do? Okay, well then let's talk about it. Go. And so now you're giving that person a chance to reply or to ignore it, which is fine because you don't want to deal with that anyways, right?
That's right. Our time's too limited.
Mm-hmm. And so now you're having, but think of the difference in what you're doing. The strategy is opposite. Rather than say, I'm going to look at a resume and weed out the weak and know that I might be weeding out good people, but I have some probability of having decent people left in my funnel. Instead, you're saying, I'm not going to weed out the weak. I'm going to I'm going to create a system that organically identifies the strong, because guess what? The secret is you don't have to weed out the weak, Jake. The weak are happy to do that for you.
Steve, I could go on this topic because right now I'm doing a lot of hiring. And so I could go on this topic for hours because I have so many questions for you. But before we run out of time, I want to flip it and I want to talk about job seekers for a minute here, because everything that we've talked about makes sense to me. It's something that I can control. You and I, Steve, we're creating a revolution. We're going to make it so that, it's cleaner to apply and things like this. But now on the flip side, I want to find a job, and the companies I'm applying to are not listening to Steve and Jake right now.
Right. Yeah, it's tough. I have to talk to a lot of people who are actually very, they're top performers and they haven't been on the job market in a while. And they're like, man, recruiting really is broken. Like, I apply for 100 jobs and I don't hear back.
From any of them.
Yeah, sure. And I think my advice even to, this is going to apply to younger people who are maybe just out of college or looking for their first or second job that are worried that they don't have enough experience to be taken seriously, all the way up to the person who's mid-career and maybe looking for more meaningful work. I think the best career advice and the best job-seeking advice I can give is to first identify really what it is you want to do, not just by job title, but what size company. The more you know yourself and know what you consider meaningful work, and then you can have conversations with people in your network about, who do you know, and just have conversations, that helps you. I don't like and I don't believe in the kind of myth that there's a catch-22 that the younger people will use. Like, well, companies want to hire people with experience, but you can only get experience by getting hired, right? Like, maybe at one point in history that was true, but we're so lucky where we are right now that if you want to be, let's say, an iOS developer and it's your passion, you want to be able to create apps for the Apple Store, you can, free of charge, you can go take classes, you can go volunteer. Like that's the first thing I tell people is just prioritize actually doing work. Go volunteer, go build something, go sell something, go create an app, go do work that you want to get paid for as if you were getting paid. Offer your skills, go to a local the Red Cross or whatever, the local charity organization, and offer to build something for them. If you're a marketing person, offer to audit their marketing and help them with it. Manage their social media. Because what you're doing, instead of sitting behind your computer and applying for jobs, which by the way I don't think is a waste of time. I just think percentage-wise it shouldn't be most of your time, because you have a 1 in 250 chance when you apply for a job of being considered. And so applying for a job is by far the least effective, statistically, the least effective way to get a job. So do actual work. And then what I would say, and then, you're obviously, you are meeting new people and you are gaining context for other people that maybe work in different industries. To some of the people that are more established in their career, the mistake that I see them make, in my opinion, I think it's a self-limiting belief, is they kind of limit themselves to being like, I'm a finance guy, or I'm a pharma guy. Nobody in oil and gas would take me seriously. And I really look to them to say, look, you've been working for 15 years as a senior leader in IT or finance or purchasing or whatever it is. You really don't think that you have a portable skill set that would be useful to another industry? Well, what is it that you've done? Like, start looking at what you want to do and what you could apply in other places. Because believe it or not, there are some very progressive employers who are looking for people with not only the skill set and the experience, but with a different perspective. And coming from another industry, people get in this industry rut. If you're an automotive supplier, you basically do all the stuff that automotive suppliers do. You go to trade shows and you put ads in trade magazines and you fly out and visit your clients and buy them lunch, which isn't bad.
You just don't stand out.
Yeah, you can literally steal stuff that's commonplace in another industry that's unheard of in yours. So there are a lot of ways, if you just audit your own interests, skills, experience, resume, reputation, network of people, and you start looking at it from the perspective of what is it that I can offer? What am I capable and motivated to do? And then, just kind of shifting that is helpful. And the other thing, I think step one in terms of like, what do you sit down and do? Make sure you manage your digital image. LinkedIn has almost twice the population of the United States. So they have over 500 million active users on LinkedIn. That is one giant SEO platform.
That's right.
You are missing out if you either don't have a profile or if you have one that's terrible. It doesn't have a picture. It doesn't say what you did. It doesn't have a professional headline. Spend an hour and take that seriously. Because it's an SEO platform, if you go in and put every job that you've had, and then maybe 3 bullet points of your significant accomplishments in each job, oftentimes people will find you. Recruiters and hiring managers will find you before you even have a chance to be proactive.
Steve, all of this is very valuable and very actionable advice. I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking about this stuff. As I mentioned, I think we could go on for a couple of hours talking about this. This is the kind of topic that really fascinates me. But most of our listeners, they are listening to us on the way to work, and they got to get into their jobs. So we're going to have to wrap it up here. But before we go, a couple of quick rapid fire questions. Learn a little bit more about what you're reading and watching, and then we'll let you go. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
The book currently on your Kindle or bedside table?
Yeah, my bedside table book right now, I'm reading a book called Psychology of Persuasion. It's just fascinating.
By Robert
Human
Cialdini.
Cognition. Yes, that's the one.
Very good. It's actually our Modern Leadership Book Club book this month, and we didn't plan it.
Interesting.
We didn't plan this, right? This is all just coincidence, but it is this month's book club book. So I hope everybody on the podcast is at least taking a look at it because it's a tremendous book. So thank you on that. How about the best movie ever made?
I just saw The Last Jedi the other night, and I'm just such a Star Wars geek. I don't dress up as characters or anything, but I'm still kind of buzzing from that. It was so cool.
And I'm a Star Wars geek. I haven't seen it yet, so no spoilers.
I won't say anything.
No spoilers. What is your leadership superpower?
Empathy.
Such a huge one. How about a motivational quote, philosophy, or mantra that you live by?
Don't confuse motion with action.
And our final question, how about the best business book ever written?
Best business book. Actually, the book that I have gifted to most people is not a business book at all. It's kind of veering from our business discussion, but it's called The Untethered Soul.
Yeah?
And it's essentially what I would call, it doesn't call itself this, but it's essentially functional Buddhism without any of the mysticism. So it doesn't matter what your beliefs are. It's really just an amazing book that kind of describes the nature of our moment-to-moment reality and really our discontentment with it and what to do about it. And so it really is just a very functional insight into your own mind, which I think, that's not a business book certainly, but how could it not permeate into all areas of your life, right?
Yeah. And, in the future, I may change this question. I love how you said that. Instead of the best business book ever written, the one that you have most gifted. I love that idea. And maybe that's what our question will be in the future, to get what people are giving away. That's a great one. Well, before we let you go, Steve, you're awesome, by the way. Thank you for coming on the podcast and really diving into a topic I think we need to cover more on this podcast. But before we let you go, how can we find out more about you, pick up a copy of your book, and any last bit of advice that you might have?
Well, as far as advice, I would say, the thing that I try and get across to people living in the technology age that we are is to use technology responsibly, to be more human, to connect with people rather than to be less human, whether that's for hiring and getting jobs or however we use technology and social media. And to get in touch with me, I'm happy to link in with anybody. My name is Steve Acho, Steveacho. And my website kind of has links and stuff to all of my businesses, steveachoresources.com. And I actually have something just for your listeners. There are a couple of freebies and giveaways, and that can be found at steveachoresources.com/ML.
Perfect. And we'll link all of that up on our show notes, so we'll be able to send them there. And we really appreciate you offering a gift to the Modern Leadership audience. We love to go and get actionable content that we could apply into our lives. Steve, again, can't thank you enough for your time and wisdom and really helping us understand both sides of this hiring process that we're going through, whether we're hiring or whether we're trying to be hired. The advice that you gave us is so actionable. Thank you for joining us.
Sorry if we went over. I apologize. I'm looking, it's over 40 minutes. So I hope I wasn't too long-winded and nobody lost their jobs from sitting in the parking lot listening to your podcast.
I'm going to have to put this part on the end of the podcast because this is the best. Hope nobody lost their job.
If you do, call me. I'll help you.
Well, my friends, and a big thanks to Steve Acho for coming on the show, really talking about a topic that is important to me. As I mentioned throughout the entire podcast, I'm right in the process of hiring somebody right now, and it's been a up and down process. I've seen some tremendously talented people, but I've seen a truckload of resumes that are not qualified that I shouldn't even be considering. And so I love this conversation about bringing more human into our hiring process. But the thing that jumped out most to me, and we spent not as much time speaking about if you're looking for a job, but if you're out looking for a job, I love what Steve taught us about finding a job is just a job proposal. A resume is just a job proposal. And if you put that in your mind as you're trying to find that opportunity, if you really put together a proposal and say, look, this is how I can benefit you as a company. This is what I bring to the team that will make an impact immediately and over the long term. I think that success will be found in your job search. Of course, everything that we talked about can be found on the show notes for this episode at jakeacarlson.com/ML56 for episode 56. And as I like to mention every week, I want to wish you the very best of days, an even better life. I hope that you have the job of your dreams. If not, go out there and get it and stay awesome. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.